Hello lovely people, in this video we'll be checking out some Sundown mid-ranges and tweeters, and I hope after everything is going to be done we'll be able to answer the question, is this just overpriced, overhyped SPL crap? Or can you consider these drivers in your next SQ-oriented system? So before we start, I would like to thank Steve Harrington from D2U Alternators. He is distributing Sundown audio equipment in the UK, and he just lent me these to check them out. These are brand new. These are not mine. I'm not gonna keep them. All of these drivers, after testing, is gonna go back to Steve. Probably he's gonna put these in his personal bill because he did say that these are his. So we do have 3 drivers from the SA series. Now, SA series in Sundown kind of terms is considered to be their SQ oriented drivers. A lot of people, whenever they hear Sundown, they say it's SPL brand, that has nothing to do with SQ. However, in a few videos back I did test the shallow mount 10-inch Neo driver and it performed very well SQ wise. And now we're gonna have a look at these ones. So we do have a 3-inch driver, a little bit smaller 2.75-inch driver, and we have a tweeter. The 3-inch driver comes with a grill, which looks bloody amazing. In this bag you have a little bit of butyl rope to seal like a gasket around the driver. And let's just take one driver out. I did remove them because I already tested them, so that's why they're out of the bag. These are the smaller 275. That's this one. And we do have these little quite big tweeters. So since we're looking at Sundown equipment, I guarantee that on my channel I will have some of my lovely bass heads, and I hope that everybody understands what mid-ranges and tweeters are used for. So we're not going to talk about that. In this video, we're going to take some objective measurements of them. That is the impedance graph, frequency response, near field, far field. We're not going to put them in the car. There will be no listening tests, only objective data. And we're going to have a look at distortion, impulse response, maybe waterfalls if we're going to see something interesting in there. And as I mentioned, impedance graphs. Talking about the price wise, these 3-inch mid-ranges, they cost, I think, $200 in the US. In the UK, not sure how much, but they look very, very nice. They look gorgeous. The only kind of gripe or problem I have with these drivers is that they're quite chunky, and if you're building custom A-pillars with this big booty, it will be difficult to install them because you can see they're kinda, yeah, they take a lot of space. A Neo version would be much more install friendly, but we do have a ferrite. There's a big pole vent. I know that these, they do have quite a lot of excursion for a 3-inch driver. So they will have a lot of output. They are rated 150 watts RMS. I don't know, mid-ranges with that power rating, I'm not sure. And I'm not really interested in that. We want to see how they perform in more of a SQ scenario, because if we're talking about these drivers as SQ drivers, we will be looking at them in SQ application. That is on moderate levels, about 90 dB, and how much wattage is going to be, I'm not sure. But coming back to this driver, it does look very, very nice. It is heavy just because of the motor, carbon fiber cone, carbon fiber dust cap, rubber surround, cast basket, and this big chunky motor structure. These come with a ring and with grills. This pops out. Whenever you're mounting them, you can mount the ring into, I don't know, whatever custom you're doing. You can mount it on the door flush if you're doing on the door panels, or you can incorporate it with body filler into an A-pillar. These go like that. These are machined, so high quality metal, and you have this grill that goes on top, and it does match the pattern of the tweeter. So these look very, very nice. I think this is supposed to come like a package, a 3-way, because I do know that they are working on a 6.5 and an 8-inch mid-bass driver. Now the second mid-range driver is this one. This is smaller driver. It is rated 30 watts RMS, which is kind of typical for a 3-inch driver. So this is 2.75, it's not 3-inch. This is stem steel basket, still very, very chunky motor, and I would expect that this should act as a full range driver. And these are quite cheap. I think they're around for $60 on Sundown website. So it is a budget driver. It looks a bit budgety. This one looks much more premium compared to this one. So we will have a look how this performs as well. And we do have this tweeter. This tweeter is very pretty chunky, metal, all glittery, all shiny. This tweeter has a ring that you can undo wherever you mount this tweeter. Then you put it on and you screw it on, and it holds in place. This grill, probably you could remove it, but I'm not going to remove it. But like looks wise and how it feels in the hand, it feels as a really premium product. So without any further ado, we're going to jump into the laptop and we're going to see how everything performs. And just a second before we do that, I'm going to show you very quickly how the measurements were performed. A little bit about the measurement setup. So I have exactly the same as I had before. You can see these little baffles that are chamfered, they are flat, they go into that big one. This is a near field measurement, and far field, I have this one 1 meter away. The signal goes from the laptop into the SMSL and then goes into the DSP, and DSP into the amplifier, and amplifier into the speaker. So basically kind of the same as we had in the previous Ultimate Midrange Shootout. If you're new to the channel or you joined very recently, last year I did the Ultimate Midrange Shootout where I tested close to 30 different drivers. There is a whole playlist, and there's a mini shootout where I tested another 6 drivers or 7, I don't remember. And basically here everything is explained, how the measurements are done and why everything is done the way it is. This is the list of all the drivers that I tested. You can see I have 35 drivers. In this video, we'll have a look at these 2 Sundowns, and we're gonna directly compare them to other 2 drivers that, in my opinion, were one of the best. One of them is ScanSpeak 10F. It's a legendary home audio driver, and the other one is One Audio WB3.E, which is probably my favorite mid-range driver to date. The price-wise, you can see if we just ignore the 275 and we focus on the SA-3M, the price is very similar, about $200, $230. So it is fair to compare them because they are in the same price range. Here I have a few specs that I'm going to mention straight away, and then we're going to see all the measurements. So FS, which is this column, One Audio is 166, ScanSpeak 107, and Sundown comes at 129, close to 130 hertz, which is very good, quite low, I would imagine, because it has quite big moving mass, because you need that to support the 150 watts RMS that is claimed. QTS, quite normal, 0.8 and 1 for the smaller one. The smaller one has an FS of 200, which is quite okay for that kind of driver. Inductance, I just had a look very quickly. So for the 3-inch driver, it's quite low. Not as low as the other 2, but it is quite low. I'm mentioning inductance because quite a lot of times you can correlate it directly to distortion, but not always. And the 275 has on the higher side inductance, but it's not that bad. Sensitivity wise is very good. My beloved One Audio is almost 95 dB sensitive. The Sundown comes at 92.3, which is very good sensitivity, a bit higher than ScanSpeak. And the smaller one, 275, comes at 90 dB sensitivity. This is measured at 1 watt at 2.83 volts. The lowest crossover frequency, we're going to have a look at the distortion as well, but I'm just going to mention very quickly. So One Audio, you can cross it at 250, and Sundown needs a little bit higher crossover at 300. Now, fair enough, because 300 hertz is mentioned on the box of these drivers as well. If you want to use it full power, you need to cross it at 300. And for the smaller one, I determined optimal crossover at 500 hertz. There's nothing mentioned on the box, but we're going to have a look at the measurements and the price. 260. So now, as a second step, we're going to have a look at the impedance graphs that I measured. This is how the Sundown 3-inch measures. The only thing that we see is a little blip at 1K and a few little blips here between 2 and 4K, but nothing really major. If we compare this to One Audio is a bit messier. It does have quite a few prominent blips, but One Audio has a little lower inductance because you can see this roll-off is a bit shallower. ScanSpeak is kind of my almost ideal driver measurement-wise. You can see it has only one blip at here close to 2K and nothing else. And the smaller one, 2.75, it measures like this. You can see it does have a higher inductance because this rise is quite steep, and we have a blip at 4K that is much more pronounced. Now we're going to have a look at the meat and bones of this, all the measurements. First of all, let's have a look at the near field response, and I'm going to show you ScanSpeak just to show you our kind of reference how an almost ideal measurement should look like. This is a near field, very close to the cone, and we see everything all the way up to, in this case, 8K, totally flat. There is one little blip here in the frequency response, exactly the same that corresponds with the impedance graph blip. One Audio, it was a bit messier and it does have quite a few blips, but we still have quite good response all the way up because it is a full range driver. It can be used all the way up to 20K. It is messy here up top, but it's kind of okay, kind of bearable. Now, Sundown, we have this. So we do have a little bit higher Q of the Sundown, a little bit lower FS compared to One Audio. That's why it has this bump, which doesn't really matter because you will be crossing it at 300 Hertz anyway. It's just a little note. And then we have blip here, and then it kind of falls off above 3K. And here we have something happening and then cone breakup at 18K. So can you use this as a full range driver? Kinda, but I wouldn't. I would cross it into a tweeter at about 2.5, 3K, so that all of this would be in the crossover. So it is a mid-range, it is a bit messy, but it's not that bad. This is a near field. Now, far field, it looks a bit different. So first of all, I did it with no crossovers. Then we applied a 300 Hertz crossover, which on this, it doesn't look like anything. But if we're comparing this with One Audio or even with ScanSpeak, you can see the ScanSpeak from 1 meter is almost totally flat, just a little bit rise at the top end. The One Audio has a big rise that I mentioned as well, that you can aim it off axis and it's going to be flat. However, the Sundown, again, this same drop after 3K, which is quite substantial, like 6-7 dB down, and then it kind of picks up at the higher frequencies, and it does play all the way to 20K. So again, can you use this as a full range driver? If you don't mind this dip, kinda, probably you could EQ it a bit as well. Like, I would prefer that this dip would be a bit lower, between 2 and 3K, because we naturally want that dip. But now with this dip starting at 3.5 and in this area, if you compare this to a totally neutral driver such as ScanSpeak like this, the Sundown will lack a little bit of that attack. It's not going to sound sibilant at all, but it's going to be sparkly at the very top, similar to One Audio that is very, very sparkly. So again, not a big deal, but far from ideal. Now I want to show you the distortion very quickly. This is THD at 90 dB level, because all of these measurements are done, you can see, at about 90 dB, and this is with no crossovers applied at all. So it is clean, like from 700 and up, because we're going to be looking everything below 1%. This is the 1% line. And then this is kind of okay, down to 230, but then below 200, the distortion rises up to 10 and 20%. So even in the box, it says that you can run it full range at 30 watts RMS, just because it has quite a lot of X-Max, so it will handle that. However, it will be a little bit on the distorted side. So even at 90 dB, 10% THD will be audible. And obviously, you wouldn't want to, I don't know in which case you would want to play a 3-inch driver all the way down. When you cross it at 300, there we go, all of this goes away. And then we have everything from like 160 all the way up 1% or lower. We do have a few peaks that go up to 2%, but overall, it's very good performance. If we're comparing this to the One Audio, which is this One Audio is a little bit cleaner in most places, like especially here in this region between 1 and 2K and above 3K. At 3K is still below 1%, and all the rest is kind of the same. ScanSpeak is much cleaner, but again, it's a totally different driver that is designed to be proper SQ driver. So there's a difference between 0.2% and 1%. But not bad overall. Not bad. Very, very comparable to One Audio. Distortion-wise, you would never hear the difference between One Audio and this Sundown. It's just, it is measurable, but it's not going to be perceivable. One thing that I did measure is I increased the level up to 100 dB, and the Sundown at 100 dB is between 1 and 2%, which is still very good, very acceptable, because again, this is an SPL brand making an SQ mid-range, so you should expect it to play very loud. And playing 100 dB, adding a second driver, 106 dB, it is loud, and we do have 2% and below, so very good numbers. And again, crossover, 300 Hertz. Very quickly looking at the impulse, this is a scan impulse, which is quite okay. One Audio has a bit longer impulse, and the Sundown is, I don't want to say a bit wobbly, but if we're comparing One Audio with Sundown, Sundown to me looks a little bit worse. But again, it's nothing really major, nothing tragical. It's just a tiny bit worse. And finally, what I want to show you is the waterfall graph. So for example, this ScanSpeak, it does have a little bit of a ringing here about 200. You can see these kind of tendrils that go off, and everything else is kind of okay. One Audio is very good. There's nothing standing out. At lower frequencies, this is very low frequency, so it's fine. And the Sundown, it does have a little bit of a ringing here between 3 and 7, 8K. So this region, you can see it does extend quite a lot, but all the other frequencies, you can see it is very short. It's much shorter than One Audio, because One Audio, you can see it does extend all the way up till here, till the end. Scan, you can still see some white pieces here, but this one, it doesn't ring anywhere apart from this region. And this region between 3K and 7K, if we're coming back here, it is this one between 3 and 7. So this dip, it's something happening with this driver in this area. So again, if you're going to cross it at 3K and leave it the rest for the tweeter, it's going to sound very nice, it's going to take a lot of power, and it's going to get very loud while being clean. So between 300 and 3K, it's ideal scenario for this mid-range. Now let's have a look at the 2.75. This is a near field, and again, compared to the scan is much flatter. This one has a higher bottom end because of the higher Q. It doesn't really matter, again, because we're going to cross it. We do have something happening here, not sure, and a little bump, but in general, it's a very nice near field response. If you compare these two, I would say the 275 has a bit nicer frequency response. From far field, it looks like this. Again, to me, this looks a little bit nicer than the 3. Even if it still has that kind of scoop out, it's not as sharp. We don't have this peak here, so it is a bit more linear, and it does have that rising top end, which sounds very sparkly, if you will. If we're going to have a look at the distortion, this is the 275 crossed at 400 Hertz, and you can see it still has a peak here and a big massive peak up to 5% distortion at like 500 Hertz. Not sure why. So I crossed it a bit higher at 500 Hertz. So if you cross it higher, it removes this peak at 200, which is still 3.5%, so it's quite a lot. So it removes this peak. However, this kind of stays the same, and it's 5% distortion at 560. So it is quite high, to be honest, but it is, after all, 275 driver, so it is a smaller driver. If you compare this to the 3-inch, the 3-inch is much cleaner in this area and at higher frequencies as well. So distortion-wise, this smaller driver is not really that good performer, especially if you compare it to the scan speak, it's a huge, massive difference. So it's like, meh. Impulse is wobbly as well. Again, if we're comparing the scan, which is much shorter up till here, this is long. So if we have a look at the waterfall graph, we can see that it's kind of behaved okay. That's a scoop out, and we do have quite big ring at 4.8K. And again, it corresponds to this dip here at the center of the dip. So how is it connected? Not sure, but it does have a little bit of a ringing. And now finally, let's have a look at the tweeter. I took the measurement at near field and I got this, which is not that great, to be honest. Like this dip, I'm not sure why that is. I thought maybe it has to do something with that one driver, so I measured the second driver because it's a pair, and the second driver has exactly the same thing. So I'm not sure. For reference, I took my beloved SB Acoustics SB29, which to me is one of the best budget tweeters, and it measures like this. So we have like no wibbly wobblies, anything. And the frequency response, you can see it does have kind of a scoop out, but it's linear, it's flat. It doesn't have anything like this or like this or like this. Not sure why that is. Then we took a far field response. So from far field, it looks much better. It does look like it's having a rising top end. It's just because of the baffle, just because I measured it in this way. In a car, this would measure totally different. That's why I'm looking at the near field response more than the far field. The far field is mainly for the distortion. So, distortion. Across it at 1K, very, very low, just to see what it does. At 1K, we do have rising distortion up to 4%, which is expected with the tweet across that low. So I started to increase the crossover frequency. Went to 3K, it removed all of this. However, this still stays. Removed it 4K, it does remove this, but this peak's still here. Then 5K, this peak is still there. This not sure why it appeared. And then finally 6K, only 6K removed this peak of distortion, and this is like 3.5%. So with the recommended crossover, which again is difficult to say because I use 24 dB slopes, the recommended crossover for highest power handling is 5K at 12 dB. So 5K at 12 dB is something like between 3 and 4K 24 dB. So you would have something like this, which objectively looking is not that great. If we have a look at SB Acoustics crossed at 3K like this, and this tweet crossed at 3K, there's a massive difference. SB Acoustics from like 1.6K, you can see it's 0.5% distortion all the way and lower, just a little bit here, but this one has quite a lot of distortion. Now this area 2.6K. If we come back to the frequency response and have a look at the near field, this is this 2.6K, 2.5, 2.6. So this area, it has to do something with this extra distortion. In my opinion, this is not good. I just very quickly want to check. 150 bucks, $150. I don't know. I would expect a better performance from $150 tweeters. Yes, they're not expensive, but like SB Acoustics with much better performance, even crossed at 2K, you can see it's like close to 1%. These cost less than the Sundown tweeters. So yeah, for the tweeters, there are better options for sure. So my final thoughts about all of these drivers. This mid-range, I do like it. Like looks-wise, it looks very, very nice. Performance-wise, me personally, for the same price, for the same budget, I would choose the One Audio driver. Me personally, because it is smaller, it's easier to mount, it is a bit more sensitive, and it performs, I don't want to say better, it doesn't perform much better. If it's for a dedicated mid-range, probably The only difference between them would be the mounting, because the One Audio is a smaller neodymium magnet, so it's easier to mount. But the performance in the mid-range between 300 and 3K is almost the same. The main difference is going to be if you want to play it all the way up, then I would 100% choose the One Audio, because that one plays up to 20K with a rising top end and it's going to sound very nice. This one, probably you could EQ it, the frequency response, just to match it. It might work as a full range driver, but I'm trying to be very critical because that's what I'm doing with every product that I'm reviewing. I don't want it to give only praise, because then it's like, what is the point? It is a good driver. It's a very good driver. It will go very loud. It does have a lot of excursion. It will take a lot of power. However, I always come back to the mounting. It's so massive and so big. That's the only thing, literally. The smaller driver, for 60 bucks, it's a very good option. It does have quite a lot of distortion, relatively speaking. It is very big and heavy to mount. So I guess it would be good for a factory upgrade, but for pure SQ, I would definitely choose something else. And these tweeters, to me, I know it's gonna sound very harsh, but they are a bit disappointing. Don't get me wrong, they look very nice. They feel premium quality, but that little one thing, unless you cross them very high, like 5-6K, then it's gonna be fine. But if you want to cross your tweeters lower, you will have cheaper and better options, especially if you want to avoid whatever this is doing above 3K. You need a tweeter that can be crossed below 3K, and this one crossed at 3K, it does have a little bit more distortion than I would feel comfortable with. And again, this is very critical from pure SQ perspective, looking only at objective measurements. I have no doubt that people will be happy with these tweeters, with all of these drivers, and for them they're gonna sound very, very nice. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to compare and, at least on paper, give you a comparison between this and what else is out there. So, Steve, thank you very much for these drivers. I always wanted to check them out. I hope that Sundown is not going to be too salty, get the pun, not going to be too salty about this review, and we might collaborate in the future, especially for the 6.5 and 8-inch mid-bass drivers. That's it for now. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.